Hello everyone and welcome back to Untold Evidence. We are on episode 69 and our journey tonight starts just after midnight on September the 26th, 1983. A computer screen in a secret Soviet bunker reported that the United States had launched a nuclear missile at the Soviet Union. The man on duty had a procedure. The procedure said to report it up the chain, and the chain at that moment in history was wound very tightly. He looked at the screen and he decided the computer was lying. His name was Stanislav Petrov. To understand the weight of that night, you have to feel the autumn around it. 1983 was one of the most dangerous years of the entire Cold War. Just weeks earlier, a Soviet fighter had shot down a Korean Airlines passenger jet, flight 007. If it's actually 007, that is fantastic. Killing everyone aboard, not fantastic, after it sprayed into Soviet airspace. And the world was furious. The Soviet leadership was paranoid, isolated, and genuinely fearful that the United States was preparing a first attack. Into that atmosphere came Stanislav Petrov, a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense Forces. On the night in question, he was the duty officer at a command center just south of Moscow, the secret facility that monitored the Soviet Union's early warning satellites, the satellites whose only real job was to watch for American missiles leaving the ground. And then the alarm. The system reported a launch, a single intercontinental ballistic missile fired from the United States heading for the Soviet Union. The bunker lit up, sirens, the word launch on the screen in front of him. Petrov's job in that moment was essentially to be a relay, to assess the system's report and pass it up the chain to the Soviet High Command, who would then have very little time to decide whether to launch in response. And then the screen changed. It was not one missile now. The system reported a second, then a third, and in total it reported 5 missiles inbound. 5 nuclear missiles, the computer said, were on their way. And every minute Petrov did not pass the warning was a minute taken away from the leadership's own time to respond. But Stanislav Petrov did not pass it up. He reported it to his superiors as a false alarm. And he did that based on a judgement, on thinking under pressure faster and more clearly than the system around him. His reasoning went something like this. If the United States was truly launching the first strike, a real attempt to destroy the Soviet Union, it would not send 5 missiles. It would send hundreds. An attack designed to win would be overwhelming. 5 was not the shape of an attack. 5 was the shape of a glitch. He also knew the satellite's early warning system was new, and he did not fully trust it. And the ground-based radar stations, which should have picked up the missiles of any kind as they rose over the horizon, were showing him nothing. So Petrov weighed the screaming computer against his own sense of how the world actually worked, and he chose his own judgment. He told his superiors it was a false alarm, and then, by his own later account, he waited. But if he was wrong, he would know soon enough. He was not wrong. No missiles came. The system had been fooled by the sunlight glinting off high-altitude clouds in just the wrong way, and read by the satellites as the flare of a launching rocket. Now, the history is often told in a particular way. The man who saved the world. A single human being who stood between the planet and nuclear war. Now we have to be careful here, because the truth is a little quieter than the legend, and the quieter version is still remarkable. So firstly, Petrov was one part of a larger system. His report was an input. Above him sat the Soviet High Command, and a launch decision would, at least in principle, have involved further people and further steps. It was not strictly accurate to say that his finger alone was the only thing between peace and annihilation. Second, we should be honest that much of the detail of that night comes from Petrov's own later accounts, given years afterwards, once the incident finally became public in the 1990s. He was, by every indication, an honest and modest witness, but it is still largely one man's recollection of a secret night. And thirdly, Petrov himself always rejected the hero framing. He repeatedly said he had simply been doing his job. He described himself as the right man in the right place at the right time. He did not think he saved the world. He thought he made a correct, technical decision based under pressure. But here is why it still matters, and it matters enormously. Even as one input among several, Petrov's judgment removed a false alarm from the chain at the single most dangerous moment it could have entered. In a year when the Soviet leadership was primed to believe an attack was coming, he handed his superiors not a warning, but a correction. He did not save the world by himself. He did something smaller and absolutely real. He refused to pass fear up the ladder when fear was the most dangerous thing in the building. What the Petrov story really leaves you with is a thought about machines and the people sitting next to them. The system did its job, it detected something and it reported it. It was just wrong. And the only thing in the bunker capable of asking, does this actually make sense, was the human being. Petrov's great act was not courageous in the dramatic sense. It was the willingness to doubt the screen. A computer said the world was going to end. A man looked at it and thought, no, I do not think it will. And he was right. He lived until 2017, mostly in quiet in a country that took decades to even tell his story. More on the 1983 crisis is in the links below. What do you think about it? Have we misrepresented anything? Have we misinformed anything? Was he the reason that nuclear war was evaded on that day? And what other incidences do you know of where we were very, very close for it all to end? Thank you for joining us. We want to follow the evidence and we want to get to the truth. Until next time, take care.